Welcome into The Verge, a show which covers the Baltimore Orioles minor leagues. The Verge is part of BSL Radio. Baltimore Sports and Life is dedicated to analysis and discussion on the Orioles, Baltimore Ravens, and the University of Maryland. The site has a team of writers providing coverage of those teams and houses live streaming content weekly. Join the conversations at the message board, like BSL on Facebook, and follow BSL on Twitter.
Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and even earn money, all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. Ever since we discovered Spotify for Podcasters, we feel like having options like video podcasts and Q&A lets us be more creative on another level. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started.
Welcome to On the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And we've got a lot we're going to get into on tonight's episode, including the new Baseball America Top 100 list, the first extensive update to the list since this offseason. The Orioles are still very well represented on that list. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, as well as one of those players who's in that top 100 that seems to be breaking out right now down at AAA Norfolk. We're also going to talk a little bit about park factors and what they look like at every Orioles minor league affiliate. Who has a hitter's park? Who has a pitcher's park? Which ballparks are neutral? We'll talk about that. And then we'll get into our first real coverage of the MLB draft since the high school and college baseball season started. We're still a long way from the draft in July, but got enough out there now that we can get into a little bit of preliminary coverage. That will be later on this show. But first, we'll start off with the new Baseball America list, which was released today. As I mentioned, the first in-season update to the top 100 list. And in total, 8 Orioles are represented. It was 7 players that appeared on the list this offseason: Grayson Rodriguez, Jackson Holliday, Colton Cowser, DL Hall, Jordan Westberg, Connor Norby, and Joey Ortiz. And they're joined by a newcomer on the list, and that is Heston Kjerstad, who propelled his hot start at Double-A Bowie up to number 98 on the list. Of course, prior to this season, Gunnar Henderson was the number 1 prospect in the game, according to Baseball America. He was the tops of not just the whole list, but of the 8 Orioles minor leaguers that appeared in the top 100. He has graduated, but the Orioles still have 8 on the list. Basically, everyone moved up in the ranking from where they were in the preseason, but some had bigger jumps than others. We're going to talk about a little bit, but I'll just start with the overall question here with Nick, which is, when you look at the fact that you just had the top prospect in the game graduate, and yet the Orioles still have 8 players on Baseball America's top 100 list. What does that say to you about the farm system?
It's the number 1 farm system in baseball. I mean, that's an easy layup question to begin the show. I mean, it's like 2 guys in the top 10, 2 guys in the top 7. Grayson Rodriguez and Jackson Holliday is phenomenal after graduating. Gunnar, even when Grayson graduates, you're going to have Jackson Holliday probably in the top 5 there. I'm curious to see how quickly they move him up. Like especially if he continues to play well. We'll dive into some of these guys a little bit deeper here, but if Holliday continues to excel in high A and you start to hear the calls, when's he getting moved up to Double-A because he's playing so well? Like, are the national lists going to move him up to that top spot before the end of the year? Because they've all hinted at it before the season started. So I'm curious to see how quickly they move him. There's at least one really big name not on this list as well, that he's on some other top 100 lists. I don't know if I'm going to spoil it already, but yeah, like you can add another guy on this list. And it's hard for me to judge like he should be on this list or who should and shouldn't be on this list. Because again, like I don't follow other systems as closely as I do the Orioles system, right? But 8 guys here in the top 100 still. You keep graduating guys, and they're just growing. They're like weeds. Like you kill one, and like 5 more are going to pop up on this list. It's fun. I mean, I'm enjoying it too for now because we don't have that 1-1 pick anymore. So we'll see how long this super deep farm system lasts. But right now, this is it's pretty cool to see.
Yeah, and there's even like a few names, like you said, just off the list. I have to imagine they're not too far away either. So very exciting. So when Grayson Rodriguez inevitably graduates soon, I would imagine maybe another guy could be popping up at the end to take his place as well. You cannot get us under 7 or 8 guys on the top 100 no matter what. Yeah, it's really cool to see. Jackson, clearly he was given even before the season started in the preseason list. It was like, wow, he's higher than we expected, and now he took a pretty big jump once Grayson, and I think there's 1 or 2 other guys that are going to be graduating because they're getting major league time right now ahead of him. So that alone, graduations will give him top 4, top 5 on this list. So very, very cool to see, and yeah, can't wait to get more into it.
Where was Jackson Holiday ranked when the season started?
15th.
They moved up 8 spots. And how many guys graduated? Just a couple. So, yeah, I think they are being pretty aggressive with them, and that's fun to see.
But honestly, how meaningful are these lists when the number 1 guy in the sport who's on the Orioles is only batting 176 right now? So, it's all fine and dandy, but let's see him get some results on the major league field.
We'll talk about Jackson Holiday here for a minute, because Holiday is now 10 games into his stint with High A Aberdeen. He's batting .297 with an .894 OPS during his time with the Ironbirds, with 9 walks against 10 strikeouts, a homer, a double, and a triple. Overall this season, between Delmarva and Aberdeen, he's slashing .352, .486, .580 with 3 homers and 23 walks against 22 strikeouts. I don't think you could ask for any more of Holiday than what you've seen from him so far this year. And the fact that he's still maintaining excellent walk to strikeout numbers at Aberdeen, even if he's not walking more than he's striking out anymore, is impressive for someone who's only 19 years old and who, as far as I know, is still the youngest player in High A.
I would have to imagine. So it's kind of funny. I just, from looking at box scores like the past couple weeks, I'm like, man, he's striking out a lot more in High A. And then I look, it's like, oh, he's got like 1 or 2 more strikeouts than walks, and it's still like 21%, which is really good, especially for his age in the competition. So it's like, for him, it's such a big strikeout rate right now. But it'll be interesting because he has yet to play in Lados Field in Aberdeen, a home game. So this week we'll start that. We'll see if that does anything to impact his offensive numbers, because obviously we've heard so much talked about that, and we'll talk more about that with the park factors coming up. But that'll be interesting to see. I'm hoping to get out there, watch him live, because at this rate, he'll be in Bowie by August and in Baltimore by 2024.
Yeah, he's got the walk rate has dropped from 21.5% all the way down to 19.6% in 10 games, 46 plate appearances. So I can't do math live on the air. That is 65 minus 46. What is that for 19? 19 plate appearances short of his low A sample size. And the numbers are pretty much identical. Yeah, the batting average isn't 392, but he's still just about to clip 300. He's sitting at 297 right now with a 145 WRC plus against High A pitching. Like you said, it will be interesting to see the home numbers, because is Aberdeen truly a pitcher-friendly park versus a hitter-friendly park? I don't really know, apparently, after reading Baseball America's article. But yeah, there's no denying. I mean, he still looks extremely. Luckily, he was in Brooklyn last week, so we did get excellent camera view. Good video last week of Jackson Holiday. He's still, shooting balls the other way. He's still very patient at the plate. Even when he's got 2 strikes, he's not getting aggressive and chasing pitches out of the zone. He's sitting there. He's challenging umpires. I saw him do that once or twice this past week. Like you rang me up, but that was not a strike. This kid knows the strike zone. I mentioned it before. His strike zone awareness in the lower levels of the minor leagues right now that I'm watching, it is very Colton Cowser-esque. He knows that strike zone, and Gunnar Henderson-esque. These guys, they all, even at their young ages and at low A levels or A-ball levels, they knew that strike zone better than some of these low A umpires do. It's fun to see him settle in so quickly too. He had 2-3 games to settle in, and then now the past 3-4 games he's played against Brooklyn there, he's taken off.
And let's keep in mind that Gunnar Henderson has this great, plate discipline and swing decisions, strike zone awareness now, but that took him 2 or 3 years to get there. Jackson's just born into it. He just knows it naturally, and probably will only get better and better as time goes on. So
Well, I think this shows why a lot of national outlets last year, when they would compare Jackson Holliday to Gunnar Henderson and Bobby Witt Jr., would say similar tools at the same age, but a much better strike zone awareness and a more advanced hitter. And so far from what we've seen, I completely agree with that assessment. If you compare Holliday, it's not an apples to apples comparison, because Gunnar's first full year of pro ball would have probably been 2020. But Holliday to Henderson compared their first full seasons. Holliday is, I think, so far showing to be a more patient hitter with better pitch recognition, better strike zone judgment than Henderson was at this same stage. And remember, Henderson tore through Delmarva his first full season in the minor leagues, and then struggled at Aberdeen for a while, started to heat up, and then got promoted to Bowie. Whereas, I don't know, I think Holliday had like one hitless night early on when he got to Aberdeen, and then ever since then, it's pretty much been Jackson Holliday.
Yeah, we'll see how pitchers, now that he's up there and more teams like, all right, we've got the book on you now, or we think we got the book on you. It'll be interesting to see, how other teams start to attack him and if he's able to adjust quickly or not. This has been an issue with a lot of guys. They're learning, especially at the AAA level, a lot of the top prospects. The league has adjusted to these guys, and some are taking a little bit longer, some are catching on a little bit more quickly, but that's going to be fun to see, because I'm sure the articles will be coming out at some point over the next couple of weeks, looking at, especially if he continues to play this well, but looking into what's going on with Jackson Holliday and his at-bats and everything. And it'll be interesting to see if the league's already adjusted to him, and if he's not being challenged, if the breaking stuff in high is not challenging him like it wasn't in low A. Yeah, I think Bob's right. By August, you're going to see him up in Double A, because you're going to have to challenge this kid at some point.
Yeah, and one more crazy stat before we move on to the next guy is Prospect Tilt on Twitter says Jackson Holliday and Junior Caminero of the Rays are the only teenagers with an ISO over 210 and a swinging strike percentage under 13. Holliday 227 ISO, 9% swinging strike rate, which is less power and a better swinging strike rate than Caminero. So just, more elite statistics to go along with the scouting that we saw.
We had to acknowledge Heston Kjerstad getting onto the list. And this is I don't want to make this an outsized thing, but it is a pretty big deal for Kjerstad, given that this is someone who, if you go back to the beginning of 2021, was a consensus top 100 prospect in baseball. Then, of course, the bout of myocarditis, followed by the hamstring injury that delayed his start to the 2022 season. And the mood with the national outlets on Kjerstad seems to have been, well, let's wait and see. He could get back there, but we just don't know if he's going to get back there, or if he's going to be able to stay healthy. And after, a rough patch last year at Aberdeen, he pretty much has been hitting a cover off the ball since September of last year, starting in Aberdeen's postseason, then the fall league, then spring training, now his start at Double-A Bowie. And I look at this as basically an acknowledgement that Kjerstad is back to being that guy who is, was seen as one of the best college bats in the 2020 draft, maybe the best left-handed college bat in the 2020 draft, and why some people thought that power could be something that got him to the major leagues quickly, even if there were some question marks about his overall hit tool. So to see him on this list for me is pretty exciting.
Yeah, and it's not like he's just, I don't know. We said he needed a fast start. I mean, this is ridiculous. I think the average OPS in Double-A and in the league, what is it, Eastern League? Eastern League still, is like 690 or something around there. He's batting 300 with an OPS of 1,044 with 4 doubles, 2 triples, 8 home runs, 8 walks, and 3 stolen bases. Playing a lot of first base, DH, right field. So I was honestly surprised he wasn't promoted today to Norfolk, but maybe they think, it doesn't hurt to give him another couple weeks, because Bowie certainly could use his bat in their lineup. Even with it, they're losing a lot of games. But, yeah, he's come out looking like it's Arizona Fall League when it's really the Eastern League, which has a suppressed run environment. So couldn't ask for a better start, and it's an awesome sign for him to get back on the top 100. And I don't think he's going to stop at 98. He'll probably be top 50 by end of the year, is my guess.
Yeah, you're going to see the national outlets start to correct that again. And I mean, we had Jonathan Mayo from MLB Pipeline on the show. I can't remember when that was, but we asked him about ranking Kjerstad, and he's just like, I don't know. It's extremely difficult. What do you do? How do you rank this kid? Because we haven't seen him play minor league baseball, and that gap between his time in Arkansas and when he takes the field is just growing and growing and growing. But yeah, now you're going to start to see the national list. He's going to climb up them. To me, the most impressive thing is like he's now over 100 plate appearances at AA, and he's striking out just 16.5% of the time. That's huge. I think just massive. He is not striking out. He is a slugging first base / corner outfielder who is not striking out against AA pitching after he's only got 65 career pro games under his belt before he debuted at AA this year. And that was after a 2+ year layoff from baseball. I mean, so to see the strikeout rates that low and to see how the strikeout rates were so incredibly high in the Arizona Fall League. And I think that was Mayo's counterpart there, Jim Callis, was like, not worried. Don't worry about those strikeouts. He's taking good pitches. He's letting he's going deep into counts on purpose, and then he's just not getting his pitch, whatever it was. He's like, don't worry about the strikeouts. Well, clearly, like Jim Callis called it. He was correct. Don't worry about the strikeouts. I mean, this is a sort of a 186 WRC plus right now in AA. Colton Cowser had video game numbers in AA last year. Heston Kjerstad is about to best those numbers in probably about the same sample size, which is absurd.
Well, and the strikeouts were the criticism of Kjerstad coming out of Arkansas. Is he going to strike out too much? Is he going to, is his ceiling like a Kyle Schwarber or a Joey Gallo? So I think we all would have expected that even if he was hitting for good numbers, Kjerstad was going to have a high strikeout rate. So I'm glad you brought up that point, Nick, because that has not been the case at all. A question here from AJ, which is what's to do with Kjerstad since he's clearly ready for AAA, but none of the AAA outfielders, including Cowser and Haskin, aren't ready for the show. I think Nick might have had an answer there with first base being worked in the Kjerstad's repertoire. Not that first base is exactly wide open at Norfolk, but it could allow for more at-bats for him.
Yeah,
well, Haskins hurt right now, so that there's some room in the outfield. DH, first base. I think you're going to prioritize Kjerstad a little bit more than Lewin Diaz and Reiner Hearn, and even Josh Lester. So I don't think playing time would be a problem. You want to get your best prospects. If they're ready to move up, you move them up, and you figure it out from there. That's my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, Lewin Diaz is the only tough one I see. I guess you could put him corner outfield sometimes, but he's pretty much primarily first base, DH, I think. But like, if you really want Josh Lester's bat in the lineup in AAA, which the broadcast talked about Lester the other day when I was watching and talking about why Lester signed with the Orioles, because the Orioles said, we want to play you all over the field. And he liked that. He thought that would make him a more attractive player if he could master more positions. It could make him a more attractive player to other teams. He knew keep him in the game a little bit longer because, I mean, you look at his career numbers and what he's done so far, he knows what he's got to do to stick around. So you can move Josh Lester around. There are at-bats to go. Even if Hudson Haskin comes back, you rotate these guys through the 3 outfield spots and DH, give them a night off as well. Like, especially Haskin, he's not going to be playing 6 days a week when he comes back, at least for the first couple of weeks. So there are plenty of at-bats. And yeah, Kjerstad and Cowser get priority. And Stowers being up in the major leagues and hopefully staying in the major leagues helps the issue a little bit as well.
Yeah, completely agree. And speaking of Norfolk, I think we have to acknowledge how one player seems to really be heating up, and that is Connor Norby. If you listened to last week's show, you heard us talk about Norfolk's lineup and go over how strong it's been and how everyone that you would have expected to hit has hit at the start of the season, yet Norby's numbers seem to be dipping a little bit towards the end of April. However, he has really heated up. He is 10 for his last 25 with 3 doubles and a home run. It was a big part of the reason why Norfolk was able to take 5 of 6 from Durham last week. The big moment for him in that series was a game-tying home run on Sunday that allowed Norfolk to win in extra innings. And on this list, worth noting again that every prospect who had been ranked before from the Orioles farm system did move up. But this time around, Norby ranks 81st after being ranked 93rd preseason by Baseball America.
I like Norby's bat is just the swings that he took this past weekend, specifically Saturday, Sunday's games. Like that was, I'm not a swing doctor. I'm not a hitting coach. I'm not going to pretend to be, but like I watch Connor Norby just about every single night. And The Norby we saw the first couple weeks of the year, it was like something's off. I don't know what it is, but that's not the Connor Norby we saw. And then John Muley had that fantastic piece that broke down prospect by prospect at AAA level and what exactly, some great quotes from Brake Ambler, of course, hitting coach in Norfolk now, breaking down like how they were being challenged by opposing pitchers and what they were doing to combat that and some of the issues these guys were having. Super enlightening article, and they mentioned the timing with Norby. And so maybe that was it. And the league had adjusted to Norby, and Norby was now in the process of adjusting back. And I don't want to say like mission accomplished yet or anything, but he had like 109.9 per hour ground out, and that's an out, but still 110 miles an hour off the bat for Norby. I think the timing's good. He had a lot of hard hit balls over the last week. He had the home run. He had a 106.1 mile per hour double, a 98.8 mile per hour double on Thursday. I mean, he was back. That swing, especially that home run swing, that was the Connor Norby of last year from start to finish.
Yeah, that was the pull a home run over the left field garage or whatever in Aberdeen that I saw a few times last year. That was classic Norby. So that was definitely encouraging as far as, I think he was getting frustrated, and all it takes, we'll see this with Gunnar Henderson. I was joking before. All it's going to take is like one really quality hit. Maybe the next time up he bloops one in, gets a little bit lucky. So I feel like it's just a confidence thing, and clearly, he was working on things and it started to work out for him, and now he's confident again, and he looks like the guy that skyrocketed up our rankings last year. So fun to watch him do that, and clearly Baseball America not worried about a cold start to the season.
And the defense, how many defensive highlights did we see? Second base and left field. He had some questionable plays in left field earlier in the week, I did notice, but I think it was a little windy. I'll give him the benefit that's out there, but two fantastic plays, showing off some range, showing off the speed. Yeah. Again, there's no rush, though, with Connor Norby. You got a long time before you have to make a decision with him, so he can just stick down there in AAA right now and just keep doing what he's doing.
Completely agree. And looking at the players that are ranked by Baseball America before we talk about some of the guys that aren't ranked, what kind of stands out to the two of you? I'll start with Bob.
What's Kobe Mayo got to do to get on Baseball America's top 100? I mean, 21 years old, OPS near 900 in AA, 8 doubles, only 3 home runs, which for him, we know he's going to hit more than that with his prodigious power. He's got to be very close to that top 100. I don't know. He's on, it's weird with Kobe because he's like the 3rd or 4th highest rated on some lists, and clearly he's at least 9th for the Orioles on Baseball Americas. So interesting. And then I think Samuel Basayo, still a little early, but I think his start in Delmarva is going to get him close to top 100 lists by midseason.
I'm surprised. I think Chili Ortiz is too low. We won't get into that. That's a given. Jordan Westburg at 68 is cool. I'm surprised DL Hall is still like 67th, to be completely honest. I know it's maybe the prospect fatigue. I feel like that's had to have settled in. And I know like these national lists aren't going to put that into consideration. How many years straight was Hunter Harvey? I was going to say Matt Harvey. Happy retirement, Matt. But Hunter Harvey, how many years was he on these top 30 lists? DL Hall is venturing into that same territory, I feel like. He was drafted in 2017. So here we are in 2023, and DL Hall is still on the prospect list. And he just hasn't blown things away this year in AAA. The velo's down, and usually I feel like these national lists are going to see that velo and forget about the weight issue, the weight training issue, and if that's a thing to increase the velo, whatever. To see the kind of lackluster results so far, and then the down velo, I would have imagined they would have been like, nah, we're going to drop DL Hall. We'll see. We'll see what happens with Hall, but interesting that he's still fairly high on this list as well.
Yeah, I don't know if that's Baseball America just maybe playing it a little bit conservative early on, not wanting to drop a guy too far over a bad month, or if they're seeing something that makes them believe that, he'll get back to being the DL Hall that we've seen at his best before too long. But I was not surprised to see him on the list at all, but I guess I was surprised that he moved up because he ranked 75th coming into this season and then jumped 8 spots to 67. So I think that was a little bit surprising to me. Great to see Kerst out on the list, as we talked about. Colton Cowser moving up a good amount, 7 spots to 34 was, I think, impressive, and I think an acknowledgement of the start that he's off to. You couldn't ask for a lot more from him. And as for Mayo, I agree, Bob. I don't know what else he would need to show at this point, short of maybe some outlets just not being completely sold coming into this year. There's a clear gap, I think, nationally on Mayo. You look at Fangraphs has generally been a little bit more aggressive on him than Baseball America has. But Mayo's start to this year, to me, has been really, really good. 271 average, 148 WRC plus, and he's only striking out a tick over 21% of the time, and he's hitting for power as a 21-year-old at Double-A.
Yeah, he's walking more than ever. His defense looks fantastic. I feel like that's underreported, that he looks really good over there. Underreported unless you're on Eric Garfield's Twitter. Shout out to him. He's ahead of the game. But, yeah, I mean, it's just I don't get it. I don't know. He's number 3 on my list, so that's why I'm like up in arms about it.
Number 3, that's it. No, I mean, he's got almost a 400 on base percentage. A 398 on base percentage for Mayo is kind of insane. Something that I was not expecting. Yeah, it's 148 WRC plus. He's really starting to come into his own. I feel like right now, these last week or so, especially at the plate, I think. I don't know if more people were maybe concerned about the strikeout issue, and is he going to have to move off the position already? I know that's a big talking point as well among a lot of writers. So I just imagine if he continues this hot start in Bowie, like, you're going to have no choice but to put him on your list, and pretty high as well. But I mean, there are some other guys here too that I imagine are in consideration. Bob mentioned Samuel Basayo. Dylan Beavers, I imagine, is probably not too far away as well. We know Kate Povich is on a list, at least ESPN's top 100 list. So it's like, that's 10, 11, 12 guys that you could choose from, that Orioles prospects that I imagine are either on this list or extremely close to being on this list. So it's still super impressive. We're over here just being greedy, I think, at this point.
We'll go now, shifting topics to park factors. And this is something we talk about a lot on this show. It basically is a set of numbers that you use to figure out, is a ballpark a hitter's park? Is it a pitcher's park? Is it neutral? Typically, we see these released about once a year in the minor leagues. It's not like the major leagues where you have something out there where you track them in real time. But we can kind of use that as a guide to tell us, on top of what we're hearing from people in the Orioles farm system, about what's a good place to hit, what's a good place to pitch, on and on. Baseball America last week released their combined park factors from 2021 and 2022. And I think Bob's going to explain here, it kind of revealed some surprises for us.
Yeah. So if you go, they section it out into 3 different topics or categories. There's runs, home runs, and batting average for ball in play, which would be obviously batting average. Norfolk ended up being the lowest run scoring environment, which is interesting considering what's going on in AAA this season for the Tides. Aberdeen is second lowest, 75th out of 120 teams, so closer to halfway mark than the bottom. And Delmarva is right in the middle, 58 out of 120. Bowie is high on the high side for the Orioles affiliates, 32 out of 120. When it comes to home runs, Bowie is easily the most home run friendly ballpark, 11th out of 120. And some of these ballparks are in high altitude in the PCL on the West Coast, so that's pretty darn high for an East Coast team. Then you got Norfolk at 48 out of 120, so close to the middle. Aberdeen, like 2/3 of the way down, 81 out of 120. Then Delmarva, 112 out of 120, one of the least homer-friendly ballparks. Creed Willems, shout out to you. And then for just batting average ball in play, Norfolk is third to last at 118 out of 120. Bowie is near the bottom as well, 96 out of 120. Delmarva, 78 out of 120. And then Aberdeen, all the way up in the highest for the Orioles, 52 out of 120. So definitely some surprises in there.
Yeah, and this isn't like gospel or anything too. I feel like it's another data point. It's something else to consider when watching these guys and looking at the numbers. Bowie, we knew this kind of solidified, like Bowie is very home run friendly. We saw that, but we just talked about Kerstad and all of his home runs. Those aren't just Bowie home runs. He's demolishing those pitches. But I'm surprised that Aberdeen is just not as it, at least the park factors say that Aberdeen is not as like detrimental to hitters as we've seen. It's kind of easy to just kind of lump these guys into like, oh, they're playing in Aberdeen, they're not going to hit well. Nobody hits well in Aberdeen. So I wonder if it's just more of like when we had Daryl Hernandez on, shout out to Daryl, doing good things over there in Oakland, soon to be Las Vegas. He talked about some of the things like the batter's eye and the lighting situation and just some of the, upkeep issues maybe that were kind of bothering him and some of the other hitters. So maybe that plays a bigger role. And my thing with high A too, and this isn't directly related to park factors, but is related to the conversation when thinking about all of this, is that high A is also the first time for a lot of these guys, it's their first full year in the major leagues. So you look at this roster right now, it's a lot of that 2022 draft class. This is their first full year. So yeah, we saw these guys rake, Judd Fabian, Dylan Beavers. We saw these guys rake, but now it's the day-to-day grind of them being pro baseball players. The changes that come with that, the adjustments that come to that. There's now a book on them as a pro. High A pitchers have, the better control, better velo, better off speed, better breaking stuff. They're going to be able to attack you a lot better than any low A pitcher is going to be able to. So I just think a lot of it's not so much Aberdeen just sucks to hit at. I think it's just, that's just a critical year. It's their first full year as pro baseball players. And so, yeah, they're learning to adjust there. It just all happens at Aberdeen. So that was really interesting to see, and why Jackson Holliday is going to put up massive numbers even at home. But yeah, the Norfolk thing was kind of crazy because Norfolk right now has scored more runs than anyone in the International League at 225. And they are hitting 295. The 295 team average for the Norfolk Tides. Second place in the International League is Columbus at 277. So that tells me that these hitters are in Norfolk. They're for real.
Yeah, to say the least. And that's a great point about Aberdeen. And we know from when we had Kyle Glazer on that the jump from low A to high A got a lot bigger since the elimination of the short season ball. So that could also play a factor as well. Yeah, Norfolk, just make them a major league team. Let's go to relegation style, just like soccer.
Would they beat Oakland in a 7-game series? The people want to know.
A game or two.
The people ask every single day.
For years being around the old South Atlantic League, I would hear about Delmarva, and it was, the power alleys were tough to hit the ball out, especially early in the year. But if you could get a ball down the line, it was going to travel. And I would suspect for the most part that that's still playing out. I don't remember, and I don't think the dimensions changed when they renovated the ballpark a few years ago, but I could be wrong. But it seems like that would probably still be the case, where if you've got someone who's a dead pull hitter, they can get the ball out at Delmarva, but the ball doesn't travel quite as well to the power alleys. And that's pretty much true at Aberdeen. When you're at the ballparks, Aberdeen's power alley feels deeper than Delmarva's. But I can, give a first-hand account here. I saw Heston Kjerstad hit a ball against Brooklyn in the playoffs last year at Aberdeen that would have been out at most ballparks. I feel fairly confident in saying that. And it dropped on the warning track for a double. So still an extra base hit, still runs scored, but not the home run that Kjerstad might have had in a decent number of high A ballparks.
I feel like Creed Willems hits every home run this year dead into the power alleys over there down in Delmarva too. So, but we knew it's cool to see at least these guys in Delmarva. Like for me, when I read these park factors, and now when I'm watching the games, like we know Creed and Basayo have insane raw power. They came into the org with that. But like for me, like now if I see Carter Young's home runs start to pile up, I'm paying more attention to Carter Young. I want to see these like fringier power guys. If their power really starts to tick up in Delmarva already, I'm much more intrigued. I'm excited for what could become of them. And that's how I'm kind of taking all of this. It's some of it is affirming, and some of it is just like, all right, I'm going to pay attention a little bit more to certain areas. That's why I like home runs, pitchers in Bowie. When they get to Bowie, like I think Justin Armbruster might have touched on this. We've had a lot of the Bowie pitchers on recently, but I think Armbruster mentioned like, there are some cheapies that teams got off of him. That's something to pay attention to when you watch these games, and why like the box score is going to say like, oh, he gave up 2 home runs, but were they Bowie home runs or were they like home runs? So it's important differentiations there, I think.
For me, I'm just like, I feel bad for these Delmarva hitters who they're already coming up first full season. A lot of these international guys, first time in cold weather. And then they have to play in like this ballpark that suppresses runs in every way. I mean, middle of the road when it comes to actual runs, but at the very bottom for home runs, near the bottom in batting average, just makes things a little bit tougher. So just makes me want to keep in perspective that these 18 to 20-year-old kids that don't put up the best numbers doesn't mean necessarily that there's no upside there.
I'm going to go back to a question here from Simpkin Tribute about the turf at Aberdeen. And Simpkin was wondering, does the turf at Aberdeen help batting average? I don't know for sure, but I actually did re-listen to our Daryl Hernandez interview a few weeks ago. And Nick, it sounds like you've listened to it recently as well. Didn't Daryl say that the turf actually moves kind of slow?
Yeah, I do remember that now that you said that. Yeah, I imagine it would be faster, but I'm just going based off like I go to JMU baseball games all the time. They've got all turf. Everything, even the pitcher's mound on home plate, there isn't a speck of dirt on the field, which is, I don't know how I feel about all these all turf fields, but
that's how it is in Aberdeen too.
I don't know how I feel about all that. Yeah, like I know some of these college stadiums, like they play fast. Like you shoot a ball into the gap. These guys that's a single, they're turning those into triple. You're turning doubles into home runs, inside the park home runs. I see it all the time. Defensively, like you got to be on your toes. I just assumed everything would be a lot faster and harder. You don't have that softer grass. You don't have the dirt to slow things down. But yeah, I do remember Daryl saying actually it plays kind of slower for him. So again, interesting, which just, again, feeds into my idea that high A is just, these guys are being challenged for the first time. And that's why the numbers are so suppressed down there.
Yeah, and I would think smoother hops, not going to be any hitting a rock and kicking a different direction for the fielders. So I don't know how that plays into it. So it is interesting that they changed that in 2021. So not exactly sure how it plays out, but it makes sense. Turf seems like it should be faster. So, theoretically, I get it.
I have to go back and listen to the first time Tim DeJean was on, because I think he was in Aberdeen at that time. And I feel like we asked him about the turf, but I don't remember off the top of my head what he had to say. But I felt like it was also along those same lines of, oh, really? I wasn't expecting that kind of answer. But.
Yeah, it's been interesting to sort of see teams shift to turf, and this isn't just Aberdeen. It's a lot of teams around professional baseball. And the pitch that seems to come now from companies that make artificial turf is that the surface plays more like a natural grass field does. Now, I would need to see that for myself a little bit, or need to have more data to be able to say for sure, yeah, it does play like grass. But I could imagine that that's, a sign that the gap has closed a little bit, where it's not just an assumption now that, okay, a team puts down turf, the ball is going to skip around and move a lot faster than it does on grass.
I don't know. Well, when I'm looking at these factors, though, as a whole, the only other thing that stood out to me is when did the walls and buoy get moved back at this point? Help out the pitcher down in Bowie, move the wall back there too.
Well, we've been waiting for a test for the left field wall at Camden Yards. Maybe it could be Bowie.
Exactly. Isn't that the Red Sox? I don't know what they are, if they're high or low A now. Greenville, don't they have the mini green monster? I mean, come on. We got to start replicating this. Bring it to the minor league ballparks.
Is it Wally instead of Baltimore? I don't know. You can go in with the Pixar crossover, the Wally movie.
You're welcome, Bowie. It just gave you gold right there. There's your marketing for the whole thing as well.
Yeah, there you go. There's facility upgrades coming around minor league baseball here in a couple of years. So consider it a promotional upgrade on top of a facility upgrade down in Bowie. I'm sure that they're thrilled with this idea of Wally to go with mascot Louie for the Bowie Bay Sox. We'll go now to something actually relating to baseball again, and that's the 2023 MLB draft. And we're kind of in unfamiliar territory this year, at least as far as the Mike Elias era goes in Baltimore, because not only do the Orioles not have the number one overall pick, they're not even picking inside the top 15 this year. They're all the way down at 17 after their 83-win season last year. That makes it a lot harder for us to sit here, especially in early May, and tell you with any degree of certainty who the Orioles are going to draft this year. Yet you can start to kind of see some of the options come together. You can look at various mock drafts and various prospect rankings and start to get a sense of who could be available at number 17 for the Orioles. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about tonight and get the chance to discuss the team needs a little bit. And MLB Pipeline did recently release a mock draft with Jim Callis, and high school infielder Aiden Miller was mocked to the Orioles at 17. However, the major outlets that have done mock drafts within the last month or so all have different answers. You look at Prospects Live had Colton Ledbetter at number 17 back in early April. Joe Doyle over at FFS Plus had Noble Meyer, a high school pitcher, back on April 12th. And then another one that we wrote down here, Just Baseball had Wake Forest third baseman Brock Wilken in their May 2nd mock draft. So obviously a variety of options at this point, but we did spend a little bit of time digging into these guys. And Nick, I'll start with you. First off, when you see how this class is taking shape, what do you think the Orioles could target there? And is there a player in particular in these mock drafts that stands out to you?
I wish we could trade picks and move up and get Paul Skeens in the system. I don't care about anybody else, though. I think just the Prospects Live pick here, and again, it's early. It is very early. It's still only May 8th right now. And some of these mocks were put out even earlier than that. But the Prospects Live mock with Mississippi State outfielder Colton Ledbetter and versus the MLB Pipeline recent release with Aiden Miller, the high school third baseman from down in Florida, presents two pretty interesting options and like directions. It's where do you think the Orioles should go this year in the draft? But like Ledbetter, I mean, SEC outfielder who mashes baseballs, like that's cold stop right there. I think that kind of seals the deal there that he could be the pick if he's there. Actually, a Samford kid who transferred to Mississippi State, but he's still OPSing over 1,000 this year in the SEC with 16 home runs. 11 home runs, in OPS in 1058, hitting 325. He had 16 home runs and then OPS over 1,000 the year before that at Samford. But so he's picked up where he left off against lower competition, and he's doing it against SEC competition. And the most impressive number with Ledbetter, he's got 42 walks to just 27 strikeouts. So you talk about a guy who I think screams Orioles draft pick. I think that could be him. He's also like 17 for 18 in stolen base attempts, which is kind of absurd as well. So kind of a do-it-all there. Versus Aiden Miller, who's the high school pick. I get a lot of like high school, tall, freakish build, power hitting, third baseman from down in Florida. I get a lot of Kobe Mayo vibes from Aiden Miller, but it's fun. Like, all right, where do you think the Orioles are going to go? Do you go the safer SEC college bat who's got a lot of tools? He's the data darling. He's the model darling pick. Or do you go the high school pick and say, with a guy like Ledbetter, you could have him up in AA pretty quickly. And so he can replenish some of these guys who likely get traded over the next couple of weeks and in the offseason. So do you go that route, replenish the guys that you're about to trade off, hopefully at the trade deadline or over the offseason? Or do you say, we're so deep at so many positions, let's keep shooting the moon and go the high school route? It's a fun conversation, fun exercise to think about.
I think I know which way is most likely for the Orioles to go. I would assume Ledbetter in that case, but to me, I'm just excited to see what the Orioles do now that they're picking later in the draft, because I actually trust this front office and Brad Selick and Mike Elias and all these guys to make the right choice. They're going to pick a guy that has the tools that they like and they think they can mold into the player and that they want and improve them just like they have with a bunch of these guys, make good players into great players, and it'll be fun to watch. I can't wait to. I don't know a ton about these guys other than what I read in these mock drafts and stuff, but I'll be excited to dive in once they do make a pick and just, research and get excited about them coming into the Orioles system. But I like Ledbetter, sounds great. Brock Wilken sounds good. This pitcher, Noble Meyer, he sounds pretty good. I doubt they're going high school pitcher first, but you never know because we've never seen him pick in this section of the draft. So we'll see.
Yeah, Miller, I'm going to talk about here for a minute because it's interesting to read some of the reports on him. It's been noted that his stock has slipped a little bit because of a handmade injury, yet a lot of outlets still seem pretty high on him. MLB Pipeline has him ranked as their 12th ranked prospect in the draft right now. gives him a 60 grade power tool and a 60 grade arm. If that doesn't sound like Kobe Mayo, I don't know what does. Fangraphs does note that he has a hits in his swing, and that's something they point out, ranking him 21st on the board. But at the same time, we've seen the Orioles take chances on players with, unconventional or questionable swings before. Now, would they do that with their top pick? I don't know, but at number 17, I get the sense that they might go for ceiling a little bit, in which case Miller could be an interesting pick. At the same time, though, Ledbetter just fits their type so well that I have to think that if he's available at 17, he's got to be one of their top choices.
Yeah. And he's a lefty. I don't think we mentioned that. He's a lefty who puts up exit velos of over 115 miles an hour right now in the SEC. So, if Ledbetter's there, that would be a really fun pick. And you got some other guys too. Again, we're just kind of going off these mock drafts. And if you look at MLB Pipeline's latest mock draft and some names of guys who are available around when the Orioles pick, I mean, yeah, they're picking 17. It's not as exciting as 1-1, but you still got some like Matt Shaw, the shortstop from Maryland, is a name who's still around this range I'm seeing in all these mock drafts. That would, for obvious reasons, be a fun pick. The guy hits a lot of home runs as well. Bryce Eldridge is another one, a high schooler out of Northern Virginia. MLB Pipeline's comment was he's basically like a Spencer Jones type, and I'll take a Spencer Jones in this system as well. It's 17, but I think we're still going to have some fun with these picks, some of these early round picks, especially. And it is going to be interesting to see where the Orioles go. But I do agree that I think if it's between a high schooler, although if Aiden Miller's as good as a lot of people say he is, and he does slip because of the hamate injury, you got to take him. But at the same time, I do feel like if you can get a guy like Ledbetter, advanced college bats, to help replenish this farm system a little bit more quickly, if these trades do go down, I feel like that's the route that the Orioles are probably going to go. But it's May 8th, so what do we know?
We'll just look at the second picks the Orioles have made in the Mike Elias drafts, which is obviously later than 17. You're able to get a Gunnar Henderson, a Kyle Stowers. That's the same draft. Dylan Beavers, Jordan Westberg, Connor Norby. So if you can get those guys in the 30 range, then I think you could do pretty well in the middle of the first.
Exactly. And I'm going to jump in with Noble Meyer here for a minute, because this is what Joe Doyle wrote back on April 12th. He mentions that Meyer is almost unanimously considered to be the top high school arm in this year's draft class. Describes him as armed with an upper 90s fastball and a breaking ball exceeding 3,000 RPMs. He's got frontline stuff and makeup. The Orioles are picking lower than they usually do at 17, but with a farm already chock full of talent, they can afford to be a little risky and reach high for upside here. I still have my doubts that the Orioles would go high school pick at that spot, and I also kind of have my doubts that he's going to slip down to 17. I get the sense that he'll be off the board before that. But if you have Noble Meyer, Aiden Miller, Colton Ledbetter available to you at 17, which seems unlikely, but let's just play around with that idea for a minute. Is there a way that the Orioles, you think, take Meyer?
No. I want to say no, just because we haven't seen it yet. But again, to go back to that Brad Selick interview it was a while ago at this point. We got to get Brad back on, update this one. But he did say the Orioles aren't opposed to taking pitchers. They look at the pitchers in that first round range, that second round range. It's just the pitchers available at that time when they're picking, and then who they like just haven't meshed at that point. They just haven't wanted to take a guy at that point. So they're not opposed to it. It just, that's not how their board has fallen to this point. So maybe it does this year and they do take a pitcher, and people can finally stop complaining that the Orioles don't draft pitchers, even though they've drafted a lot of pitchers and some of them are now up in the AA ranks pitching extremely well. So they're still able to find some good pitching talent much later in drafts.
Question here from Vivek. Do we think this year the Orioles have the least likelihood of going under slot at number 17? And I think it's a good time to bring up this point, which is that the Orioles will have 5 of the first 5 picks inside the top 100, including the 100th pick overall, which is compensation for not signing Nolan McLean last year. However, they do not have a competitive balance pick this year. So the Orioles will pick at 17th and then not again until 53rd, then 63rd, and then 86th, and then 100th. And just to clarify my earlier statement, they don't have a competitive round A pick. They do have a competitive balanced round B pick, but that's down at 63. So you're looking at quite a gap between 17 and 53 in terms of the draft. So my sense is maybe that if they do go under slot, it's with a pick later on and not the 17th. But I'm curious to get your guys' thoughts on that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think especially, you're not going to save as much when you're going under slot at 17 rather than the top 5. I think you can really save like $1 million plus at that upper echelon. Here, you're saving a couple $100,000. Maybe if you go like all Kansas City Royals and do Frank Mazzucati or something like that, you could save a chunk of change. But no, I think you're going to want to just take the best player on your board that you think is a good value. And then, like you said, you can always do like a senior sign a little bit later, save chunks here and there, and still get guys you like, but just for a little bit less money. So I completely agree with Zach.
Yeah, that's when you get that 5th, 6th rounder and you give them a $10,000 signing bonus, which I know is a whole nother discussion point that you can have about this draft and how ridiculous and archaic some of the process is. But yeah, I think that's where you're going to see them save the money. But again, like I think last year's draft, they went risky. Like they went Carter Young, thinking I think maybe that was a fallback option for he who must not be named, Nolan McLean, say the name, from Oklahoma State, knowing maybe there's some issues there. I don't know. Or maybe those medical issues were late showing, and that was a whole nother, I don't know. Who knows if we'll ever get the true story there with Nolan McLean and Carter Young signing. But like they were taking guys that they hadn't even talked to. The Andrew Walter out of Miami, even the kid from Richmond in the last pick. The guys that they didn't end up signing, I think reading articles that came out after they announced they were all going back to college were all like, other than Walter, who I think wanted to pitch with his brother at Miami, everyone else was like, yeah, the Orioles, well, even Walter in this case, they were like, the Orioles never contacted me before the draft. I had no idea they were interested. And the Orioles went out and selected those guys. So I think maybe they weren't afraid starting last year to get a little bit more risky with the picks. And so now when you're playing at 17, do you get a little bit more risky considering how deep this farm system is now? So I don't know. I'm getting excited now just talking about this.
Yeah, it's worth noting that we are still 2 months away from the draft. A lot of things can happen, and it feels like coming up with a mock draft has gotten a lot harder in the years as teams have started to move money around, with maybe going under slot with that top pick and then spreading around later on. That's a separate discussion altogether. But even though we are pretty far out at this point, it's still fun to focus on the draft. And with that, we're going to turn our attention now to our final segment of the show, which is where we shout out a player outside of the top 30 of our prospect rankings for the Orioles farm system for something that they've done, whether it's been a good game, a good week, or something interesting in their stat line. And I'm going to start with Bob, who has a player that you recognize from the WBC, as well as a player that I think a lot of Terps fans are going to recognize as well.
Yeah, Connor Newcomb, what's up? Maxwell Costas is going to be my hitter. He started the season as like a bench player for low A Delmarva, and then when Aberdeen needed someone to come up because I think a couple of their guys were getting pulled up to Bowie for injury stuff, he goes up there 4 games in Aberdeen and just mashing home runs left and right, including a grand slam. But if you combine his total time, his 10 games that he's played between the two A-ball teams, he's batting .344 with an 1182 OPS, almost 10% walk rate, 26.8% strikeout rate, 204 WRC plus. It's just fun to see. Who needs TT Bowens? Where is he? I don't know. We got Maxwell Costas. So he's like a young man's Curtis Terry, and I saw him hit a home run in spring training this year, so that says something. Ryan Long, on the other hand, is a pitcher who, he was a 17th round pick in a 2021 draft, 6'6", tall, right-hander. What do you know, with some hop. 23 years old, like you said, pitched for Great Britain in the WBC, and I think he held his own there. Coming in, high A, Aberdeen, and just striking out batters. 33.8% of batters he's striking out, walking 8.8%, which is better than he had last year. Striking out more, walking less. Pretty good ingredient. 2.45 ERA on the season, 3.39 FIP, So looks good there, and hopefully he keeps that up and is just another one of these options that we keep churning out of these draft classes. Just, it's a bunch of guys like, oh, Daniel Fetterman, some undrafted relief prospect. Oh, he's throwing 4 innings, striking out 9. Okay, that's weird. Ryan Long, same kind of thing. So this pitching development, they know how to turn these guys into something, probably still a relief prospect, but you never know.
Yeah, it was a week of pitching down in Aberdeen. Fantastic performances. I'll start with my guy was an Aberdeen pitcher as well as Alex Pham. I think it kind of be easier to talk about guys who didn't excel last week for Aberdeen, which is fun to think about. But Pham pitched Saturday, had 5 shutout innings, just 1 hit allowed. He struck out 6. I mean, the curveball has been one of my favorite pitches in the system since he was drafted back in 2021. But shout out to Jeff Ponce. I saw some tweets from him. I think he was in Brooklyn. I know he lives close by, but I guess he was at that Brooklyn series and caught some games and had some really good footage and some numbers, notes on guys. And he said Pham was throwing 91 to 93, a fastball with plus ride, cut slider at 84, 85, and a changeup at 85, 86 to go along with that really impressive curveball that he's got. He's got 2.45 ERA on the year right now, 23 strikeouts in 18 innings. Moving him as he's been starting a lot of games for Aberdeen. Aberdeen's been using a lot of guys who we've seen as strictly relievers so far in the system. They've been moved to the rotation so far this year, but I mean, he's listed at 5'11", 165. It was a 19th round pick out of San Francisco. So like, I'm going to root for these guys extra hard. And my hitter is Billy Cook. Shout out to Billy Cook, who went 9 for 22 last week. So that's a 409 average. Had a double, 3 home runs, drove in 11 runs in 6 games, walked twice. Surprised he didn't steal a base because he does that a lot. But it's a 1344 OPS last week. Even though he had that big week, he's still hitting just 188 on the year. So that kind of gives you an idea of what his season has been like so far. But he does tend to have these explosive weeks, I think, throughout the season. So good to see him string together some good games. He also had at least 1, if not 2, outfield assists last week. I can't remember off the top of my head, but runners should know by now not to challenge Billy Cook in the outfield. The outfielder / first baseman / second baseman. He does it all defensively, but that outfield arm has been very impressive this year as well.
Hold up. I think you meant Billy, let him cook.
I saw that tweet a lot this weekend. It was, it's an easy one, guys.
Yeah.
I'll make it a clean sweep for Aberdeen's pitching staff. My guy this week is Nick Ritzman. Ritzman posted a scoreless outing at Brooklyn last week, and he is now up to 6 1/3 innings pitched this season without allowing a run, 5 strikeouts in that span against 2 walks. Ritzman's a guy who came over from the Tigers system last year. He actually been released by Detroit in the offseason and didn't debut with the Orioles until May down in the FCL. Got some time in the Arizona Fall League. We've heard a lot about how that fastball-slider combination can be really effective, and he did have a velo spike in between his time with the Tigers and the Orioles that so far has managed to sustain itself. So Ritzman, a guy you definitely want to keep your eyes on this year because he's someone that if he can continue his hot start at Aberdeen, could get to Bowie. And then my choice for the hitter is a hitter at Bowie, and that is Ramon Rodriguez, who was excellent last week for the Bay Sox. 4 games against Erie, he went 7 for 15 at the plate with an RBI, 2 walks, and 1 strikeout. And here's something interesting about Rodriguez. 53 plate appearances so far this season. He has walked 9 times and only struck out 5. Rodriguez is someone we've heard a lot about from pitchers over the years, about how good he is to throw to and how he works well with the pitching staff. And this year at Bowie, small sample size, but off to a nice start offensively through 15 games, batting .279 with a .776 OPS, and certainly added some value down in Bowie's lineup against Erie last week.
I like Nick Richmond, I think, is going to be sneaky. He went to the AFL as well. We were like, who? Why? I think some of these Aberdeen relievers, Keegan Gillis has yet to give up a run this year. Jensen Elliott and Bowie has yet to give up a run this year. It's so many relief arms are pitching well. So, and I think AJ's question there about Anthony Servideo, because I still see this question a lot as well, like on Twitter. Anthony Servideo is in AA because he's like an injury replacement. So I don't think it wasn't like a merit-based promotion, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think he's just filling in. He's bouncing around. Got that Davis Tavares role, who I think is like pitching now. I think I saw
What?
That's interesting.
Yeah,
Do what you gotta do.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, do what you gotta do to stay in the system.
Yep. And that's good points on Stravidio. So that does it for us this week. We will be back next week, and we'll have more Orioles coverage for you then. In the meantime, check out BaltimoreSportsandLife.com for the latest on the Orioles, the Ravens, college sports, and more. And while you're there, be sure to hop on the message board and join discussing with fellow readers of the site as well as contributors. Also, check us out on social media, including Twitter at BSL on the Verge, where we post clips throughout the week of the minor league action. And of course, if you haven't already, please consider signing up for our Patreon community. You can join for as little as $3 a month, and at the $5 and $10 levels, get access to exclusive daily content, early access to interviews, our weekly Major League mailbags, and more. And of course, our top 50 updates each month. Our one for the month of May just dropped last week. You're going to want to check that out if you haven't listened to it already. And
the WhatsApp group. There was over 100 messages while we were recording tonight talking about the game, which we lost 3-0. But it's a cool community to get involved with too. So,
yep, absolutely. You're gonna want to check that out, and you can get access to the WhatsApp chat at all levels of Patreon memberships. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to On the Verge.
That'll do it for this week's episode of On the Verge. Be sure to check out our Patreon page where you can help show your support for the show and get bonus content, including monthly top 50 updates to our prospect list and daily game recaps during the season, and much, much more.